All right, so to continue, I'll kind of continue about some of my like Marxist ideas that I had in 2013, and then I regained in 2020, and also how I misutilized and uh, misappropriated my grandpa's teachings. So like one example was, so for instance, like I said, I didn't want to believe the supernatural stuff and or the spiritual stuff, because I always saw spirituality and religion as white supremacist, and like I was a Marxist. I saw it as maintaining the status quo, and I wanted, I saw myself as Jewish, and I wanted to mix the white people. So like one example would be like, when Paul, I think, or it was either Peter or Paul, he's put in prison, right? And then it says that an earthquake came sent by God, and then he or no, or I think it was Peter. It was an earthquake came, and he left. And then with Paul, it was it said that just miraculously the door of the prison opened and he was released. But I wanted to be like, no, it wasn't miracles. It was because Paul and Peter were teaching the Romans the communist ideology, which was anti-empire, anti-stratification, and the Roman soldiers, who are the lower class of the Roman Empire, they joined the Jews and they let the Jews out. They let Paul and Peter out because they basically double crossed on their empire. And I wanted to think that the same thing happened with Herod, when they killed Herod, it was because they double crossed on the empire. And so, and I wanted to be like, yeah, and what they say is, oh, God did that. But I saw that as just their delusions. Really, it was I wanted to see things in the more materialistic Marxist way. Of no, it wasn't God that did that. Because again, when I think of God, I'm thinking of victim blaming, of people being like, oh yeah, that these people died because of their sins. And I want to be like, no, it wasn't because of their sins. Because I was against victim blaming, and I saw Jews as victims, so I didn't want to be for victim blaming. And I wanted a materialistic approach to be like, no, diseases come from genes, genetics, and the conquering of the Jews had nothing to do with the Jews sinning and they were conquered because they were sinning. No, it had to do. If it was because of sinning, it was because they were mistreating the poor, because I was a Marxist, so it was because they were mistreating the poor. But, it had nothing, and I wanted to see all criminality as just, as actually virtuous. Because I just saw, because again, I want to see the black people as good and the white people as bad. So I wanted to be like, yeah, all criminals, it's just due to capitalism, it's just due to stratification in society. And the criminals are really the victims. So, because I wanted all the black people to be released from jail so they would mix with the white people. And I wanted to see the white people as bad, and I wanted to make the white people feel bad so the black people would race mix with the white women who are very susceptible to that stuff, and be like, oh yeah, the black people are actually the victims and they're actually the good guys, and let's race mix with them. That's what I wanted. So basically I didn't want to see it. I wanted to see things in the Marxist perspective. So I wanted to undermine, and like I said, I saw all the New Testament as an allegory of the destruction of the Roman Empire, destruction of the Indo-Europeans by the Jews, who taught them Marxism, who taught them communism. Because the Jews never came from Egypt. They were actually Canaanite serfs. I wanted to believe Finkelstein's, all these scholarly Marxist, anti-religious theories. So just like some more examples of that was, but like I said, my grandpa taught me, he was like, Ryan, there is no such thing as racism. But I was like, oh yeah, there is no such thing as racism, because there's no such thing as race. So again, I misinterpreted my grandpa's teachings. My grandpa was saying there's just dualistic software and the outcomes of dualistic software. But I want to be like, oh yeah, grandpa, you're right. There is no such thing as racism, because there's no such thing as race. White people and black people, that's just a social construction. So they should all just mix. That's what I wanted, because I saw myself as Jewish. So, that's why I wanted Marxism, and I wanted the borders dissolved and everything. And then I wrote in my Based on True Story book that I wrote in 2020, and like even the ones I wrote in 2013 and stuff, that, probably I just imagine like Meghan Markle, the German chancellor, reading my books and being like, wow, this is really amazing. And, but I was saying stuff like, and that's probably why she let all the Muslims in. But I was saying stuff like, yeah, I was once a Darwinist, and that's why I was a white supremacist. It was actually opposite was true. When I was a Darwinist, I was not a white supremacist. I was for race mixing. And I was a Darwinist because I wanted to not believe in religiosity and spirituality because I wanted to race mix the white people. And I wanted to believe it was all just Darwinism. And I wanted to say that the remedy to Darwinism is everybody race mixes, and then there'll be no more religion, and everyone will be happy, and there will be no more division because everyone will be race mixed. And the only reason why there is division is because there's different races, and different races adopt different religions. It's just all Darwinism. But I wanted to invert everything and be like, oh, I was racist because I believed in Darwinism. That wasn't true. And I wanted to be like, basically, but again, my grandpa said there is no such thing as racism, but I wanted to be like, I was like, I was once racist, but now I'm misinterpreting my grandpa's teachings because I didn't understand my grandpa's teachings. So I'm like, I was once racist, but now I've transcended dualistic software, and I've transcended the ego, and I've transcended the self, and now I'm not racist anymore, and now I'm for welfare. And my grandpa doesn't get it. My grandpa thinks that welfare can hurt the poor, but I read this book saying that welfare actually helps the poor, and I was once racist and I became white supremacist, but now I've remedied, and like that guy who had the boat. There's a slave master who wrote the song, I was once lost, but now I'm found, I'm blind, but now I see. And I'm writing like, I was once lost, but now I'm found, I was blind, but now I see. And basically I was trying to say, like, I was once racist, but now I'm not racist anymore. But even though there's no such thing as racism, but I once believed in Darwinism, but I did still believe in Darwinism. But it's so funny. But I basically was trying to get everyone to race mix. So I was saying, like, I once believed that there was such thing as race, but now I don't believe in race anymore. And I see, everything is energy, like my grandpa teaches, and I've transcended dualistic software. I transcend the self, and I no longer am against welfare, and I no longer am against open borders, and so I basically became a Marxist again. But again, I thought that I was following my grandpa's teachings because my grandpa confused me. I'm like, well, what are you really teaching? Transcend the self. I was like, Grandpa, doesn't that mean to be for welfare? Like, why would you be against welfare if you transcended the self? But my grandpa would say he's not against welfare, but he would say that you're receptive and you're open to inspiration and the truth. So there's always concessions, and there's always, there's never any fixed formula, like, don't be good for welfare. If you're in the flow, you could be open for different things. But my grandpa would say, for the most part, welfare doesn't help the poor. It helps the person who gives, if he voluntarily gives, to let go of attachments. But I'll get to that later, how I started to understand that later. But anyways, I went back to being a Marxist, and I thought that I was following my grandpa's teachings because I was like, look, Grandpa, I'm not a white supremacist. I've transcended the ego. But I didn't realize that I didn't really transcend the self. I was still stuck in the self. I still saw myself as Jewish, and I was trying to be good by wanting welfare and open borders, but really I had an agenda. And, I was trying to be good, but I wasn't really a beneficial presence. I wasn't really in the flow. I wanted to really just destroy the white race because I saw the white race as a threat to the Jews. So, it's pretty ridiculous. It's pretty crazy. But just like some examples of ways I misinterpreted the Bible was, I remember I went to this church by this Mexican pastor, and he was talking about how before the Israelites went into, I think it was like the Midianites, I forget who it was, but they were drinking water, and some of the Jews drank water in cups, and some of them lapped water like dogs. And I think it was the Jews who lapped the waters like dogs. I'm pretty sure, I don't remember exactly, but I think that those are the ones that God sent. I don't remember which one, but God sent those ones into battle, and not the other ones. And according to this pastor, he said the reason why is because the ones who would lap like dogs, they wouldn't have awareness. But those are the ones who God wanted to send into battle, because God wanted to show it's not you guys who are going to win this battle. It is me who is going to win the battle. I win it for you. And it kind of fits with my grandpa's idea, where my grandpa would be like, God says, vengeance is mine, not yours. Vengeance is mine. So the idea is like, you do not get vengeance. God gets vengeance. So that means transcend the self to God. Or like, with Jesus says, with man it is impossible. With God, anything is possible. So that's saying transcend the self to the flow. So in this case, it's like, no, you guys don't win the battle. I win the battle. So the idea was, what this pastor was saying is, it's about transcending the self. And I was like, oh, good. That's what my grandpa teaches. So I'm like, yeah, transcend the self. But in my mind, again, I still didn't understand what transcending the self means. It's like, okay, you don't win the battle, but God wins the battle. It's not you. It's not the self. It's God. It's the flow, right? But I'm like, well, okay, well, I transcend the self, so that means I should be for race mixing, and I should be for, I'm not a white supremacist. I've transcended the self. I should be for race mixing. But I didn't realize that that was still the self. I was still in what my grandpa would call experiential calculative thinking. I'm thinking, well, if you transcend the self, you must be for race mixing and open borders, and everyone should mix. And that's transcending dualistic software. But I didn't realize that that was still my ego. That was still my experiential thinking, my calculative thinking. My grandpa says experiential thinking is thoughts based around experience, right? But experience is an illusion because we don't experience reality. So, but when you transcend the self, that's the flow, and that is transcending experience, experience-based thinking, into inspiration. And my grandpa tried to make it too rational. He'd be like, inspiration is the accumulation of all of your knowledge that ends up in synergy that is greater than the sum of its component parts. But again, he didn't really think of it as coming from a supernatural intelligence when it could be. But my grandpa tried to even make that more rational, because my grandpa tried to make God into energy. But again, I started to realize that Dr. Hora didn't really teach that. Dr. Hora did say that everything is energy, but he said God is infinite love intelligence. And my grandpa tried to undercut the idea of intelligence, saying that that consciousness is just an epiphenomena of the synergy of the brain patterns. But I don't know if that might be still a little bit more materialistic. And Dr. Hora even said that everything is like a dream. It could be a hologram. But regardless, the self is an illusion. An experience is an illusion. So, but anyways, but my point is, I was thinking, Grandpa, didn't I transcend dualistic software? Aren't I in the flow? Aren't I transcending the ego by being for? So I didn't understand why my grandpa was against welfare and, not necessarily for open borders. Now, my grandpa wasn't opposed to it, but my grandpa, I think that my grandpa would say that, if you're in the flow, you don't need to mix everybody, but you can wish the best for people on the other side of the border and help people on the other side of the border, but you don't have to try to mix everybody, but me as a Jew, seeing myself as Jewish, I wanted to mix the white people, but I was thinking that's transcending the ego. I've transcended white supremacy. So, but my grandpa would say, no, you didn't transcend the ego. You did. Now I know my grandpa would say, you didn't transcend dualistic software. Really, you're still in dualistic software. You were in predator-prey software toward white people. But I didn't realize that. So, but I'm writing these books, and it's basically Marxist manifestos where I misused my grandpa's teachings and my grandpa's profound spiritual teachings, and I misutilized them in a Marxist race mixing agenda. So, and like I said, in 2020, I was hanging out with, whenever you see Jews, you're going to see a lot of race mixing. Jews don't like, and it's not always the case, but a lot of Jews don't like white people, and they love black people because they see white people as a threat, and they love black people. So I was going to these spiritual places, one place where there was a black leader and a lot of Jews were there, and it's kind of it's kind of religious, but religion is kind of, still kind of white supremacist, but Jews will always be more gravitating toward blacks and gravitating toward the left-handed path of drug use. And so, they say whenever you see drug use or sex trafficking and just debauchery and degeneracy, a lot of times you see a lot of Jews. But it's because, pornography, all that stuff. But I think it's because a lot of Jews are anti-society because they see themselves as the victims, right? And they're, so I'll just give another example of that. My Aramean, or my Indian friend, not Indian, my Italian friend, he was telling me how a lot of Jews are involved in pornography and stuff. And I remember we were driving by some Armenian guys, and he was like, fuck the Armenians, they're pieces of shit. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, you're just in dualistic software, man. You're a white supremacist. You're in dualistic software. But I didn't realize that I was also, because my friend was like, the Armenians were the Arameans of the Bible, and that those are the people who God wanted to kill. But in my mind, I was like, no, dude, they weren't the Armenian. And I like the Armenians because I like the race mixing. So Kim Kardashian, I liked Kim Kardashian, and I saw a kinship with them because they were also victims, and they were also, there was a genocide against Armenians, and there's also a genocide against Jews. So I'm like, yeah, we're anti-white too, and we're also victims, and so I like them. So my Italian friend, I'm like, dude, you're just in dualistic. In my mind, I'm like, you're just in dualistic software. You're not in the flow. But I wasn't in the flow either. I wanted race mixing. I wanted to destroy the white race. But I didn't realize that. In my mind, I was like, that's the flow. That's transcending the ego. And I was like, my Italian friend hasn't transcended the ego. But I was not transcended the ego just as much as he wasn't. Right? So but like I said, I was hanging out with a lot of Jews and a lot going to the like, but they would do like spirituality type of stuff, but a lot of it is like just drug use, degeneracy. You know, hanging out with like black people, a lot of black people. A lot of the Jewish women would be in harems with black guys doing drugs. Probably a lot of sex trafficking going on. You know, but I'm hanging out with these like so-called spiritual people, but really it's just polyamory, degeneracy, and a lot of them are Jewish. And you see that with a lot of people, a lot of Jewish women love dating black guys, and the black guy and the white Jewish men love to give black guys jobs and, you know, get black guys into entertainment, and it's like, and just degenerate society. So you do see that a lot. And I was hanging out with those people because in my mind, I was like, you know, because this is what my grandpa taught me. My grandpa taught me, Jesus said either be hot or cold, not lukewarm. Now, I never did drugs. I never did any of that stuff. And I didn't even do polyamory. But was it because I was in the flow? I don't think so. I think it was because I didn't want to get an STD, but I still wanted to be a sperm donor. So I still was thinking in a Darwinian sense. But I just didn't have sex with these hippie girls, even though they wanted to, because I didn't want to get an STD. So was I really in the flow, though? I don't know. I don't think so. I was still seeing things in a Darwinian lens and anti-religious lens. But my grandpa taught me. And the Bible says Jesus says either be hot or cold and not lukewarm, because if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. So again, I was thinking left-handed path. Yeah, you know, these Jews who are, or these hippies and these people, you know, these race mixers who are degenerate and polyamorous and drug addicts and losers. I was like, they're actually closer to God because they're cold. And as my grandpa taught, you know, if you're just in conformity, if you're just lukewarm, you might still believe you're a separate self. You might still be stuck in the self, and you never have any impetus to move out of it. But the people who are cold, they might get themselves in trouble, and they might have more impetus to transcend the self and to recognize. But my grandpa didn't really teach me enough yet, so I'll get to that later. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, the good is bad and the bad is good. The black people are good. The white people are bad. You know. So I like the Jews who are degenerate. I like the ones that are doing drugs and want race mixing and stuff. And I misutilize the teachings. Like, again, everything is one, you know. So then, you know, there is no family. We're all just one. So I'm like, yeah, let's dissolve the family, you know. But my grandpa would say that, you know, again, I misinterpret that. I'm thinking, okay, well, if everything is one, then let, you know, the whites, you know, being a part of the family is white supremacy. That people, you know, Fox News is just for the family because it's white supremacy. They want to maintain the family so they can maintain the white race. So the answer is, let's dissolve the family. I was a Marxist. Let's dissolve the family. But again, that's not the flow either. That's not transcending the ego either. I'm thinking, I'm transcending white supremacy. But no, that was also an ego agenda because I saw myself as Jewish. I wanted to destroy. So, but I didn't really recognize that. So, but my grandpa would say, no, if you're in the flow, it doesn't mean you dissolve the family. You know, you still would, if you're in the flow, there would be harmony within the family. You know, but you would also, but most likely, but also if you're in the flow, you know, there's no formula. There's no formula for the flow. And most people are not always in the flow. But my grandpa could say you could eventually get to the point where you're always in the flow, though. And my grandpa would say that that's probably where Jesus was. But anyways, so I'm doing that stuff, okay. And then, as I said, I wanted to get basketball videos when I was younger. And another reason why I wrote my Based on True Story books that were like anti-religious, anti-white leftists is because I wanted to get basketball videos when I was younger. And a lot of my friends were black, and I thought they had my basketball videos. So I thought, okay, if I appeal to the black people, and I'm leftist, and I'm for open borders, and I'm for race mixing and stuff, and I'm anti-racism, you know, there is no such thing as race. There is no race. You know, I thought that they would be more inclined to give me basketball videos. But so again, I wasn't in the flow, but my grandpa also confused me. I was just confused at this point. So I wanted to get basketball videos when I was younger. So I ended up contacting my friend Malik, and he got me in contact with it. But my friend Malik told me that he had the videos. But then he told me that his dad had the videos, but he told me that his dad had gone crazy. But I told him, dude, if your dad gives me the videos, I'll give him a lot of money, man. Just because I wanted videos when I was younger so I could study how I shot. I could study the stuff. Whenever I get videos, it helps me a ton. I want to study what I did when I was the best, when I was unconscious. I was making over 4 3-pointers a game when I was playing with Malik on South Coast, the best team in the country, when I was 12. You know, so I wanted videos. But, so I'll get to that in the next part.